Oh,
It's not. Districts doesn't have that person.
yeah, that's a mistake.
Yeah. Ready?
Okay, awesome.
Really.
All right, guys, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. So today we're going to be talking about design, and specifically design for business. And before we go into that, I guess, let me make sure that my jacket doesn't almost catch on fire like it did last time. Great. I always keep that thing like right towards the heater, and it's always like just on the verge of bursting into flames when I get back. Okay. So welcome to Cake. And again, Cake, for those of you who don't know, is just kind of, it's a weekly talk / workshop, and with an emphasis on getting things done fast and using tactics that are actually immediately implementable, instead of just sort of vague business strategy, and specifically on taking on projects without funding and without taking out loans, and really just trying to bootstrap and start as small as you can so that you can get meaningful feedback without investing a lot of money to find out that your idea was completely wrong, which more than half of them end up being anyway. We've been trying to cover just a lot of the basic business skills that people need in order to get something off the ground to begin with. And one of the things we haven't really talked about too much is just some general tips for design. So by no means is it's meant to be like a course on the how to, it's not a course on artistic merit, I guess. It's more on how to get across the ideas that you want really clearly, and to make sure that design supports the actions that you want people to be taking. So once again, very much towards this very practical side of design. And I guess I'll just start with some of my own thoughts and kind of the Cake thoughts on design. And then from there we're going to go into what I think are the main points to consider, which are basically simplicity, usability, and actionability, I guess would be the third one, if that's a word. And design is really important. And you can think of things like, and specifically in having a consistent design too, and something that looks nice. Like a really classic kind of example that I can think of is Facebook versus MySpace, where MySpace kind of gave people just enough rope to hang themselves by. And you have these designs that people did with crazy repeating background images with like completely illegible pink text done in Comic Sans across it, and just became a cesspool of awfulness. As opposed to Facebook, which requires you to maintain very strict design specifications, which they change and alter as they go along, but looks much, much nicer. I think one of the important things with design too, probably the most important, is to make sure that it actually fits with the message that you want to keep with your business and with what you're trying to say. And as such, there's not really totally universal advice, I guess, that I can give you on design. Like Cake, for example, if we had one of those typical business websites that has like blue and yellow text and has like people in business suits shaking hands, and I was like browsing around a couple of the other business consulting companies before I came out here just to see how they did their design as well. And a lot of them were really slick. But if you went to the Cake website and found that, you probably wouldn't come out to Cake, especially with what we're trying to push. We're like, oh yeah, lots of down and dirty tactics, like do it up, and it's this nice polished website with gradients and like beautiful stock images. So keeping it really simple, and even our design, we kind of went with a monochromatic color scheme, just with the urge of keeping everything as like simple and accessible as we can with that. And if you're wondering why I'm looking at my phone, it's because I forgot to print out my notes, so talking notes are on this thing this time. Also, just like looking at a bunch of different design is a great way to get a sense for what works. I mentioned it for copywriting too. My friend and I, back in Santa Barbara a few years ago, would open every single piece of junk mail that came our way, just to read the crazy copy that people would write and see kind of what tactics made us want to read more. And doing the exact same thing for graphic design, actually looking at billboards and looking at, my actually favorite thing to do is look at a wall full of business cards and see which of the business cards immediately stands out to me, because there's so many, and the ones that draw your eye must be doing something right. Same with any kind of public announcement boards, anything where you just see this like jumbled mess. The things that actually draw your attention is a really good thing to pay attention to, I think, for just a little tactic for personal improvement. And that's Kurt Vonnegut one of my favorite quotes from like anyone. Actually, I have like 5 of them are from Kurt Vonnegut because he's amazing. But he says that if you want to know what good versus bad art is, like look at 10,000 pieces of artwork and you'll just never wonder about the difference again. Which I think is also very true. Like the more you just surround yourself with good and bad design, the more you are able to tell them apart and see what's going on there. So let's just launch into it. Simplicity. I like the acronyms KISS and DRY, which is keep it simple, stupid, is what KISS stands for. That was actually an Air Force term back in the day. Just a little history that I found when I was looking that up today was, I guess initially it was not meant as like keep it simple, comma, stupid, like calling the person you're talking to stupid, but like keep it simple, stupid. Like keep it so simple that even the most untrained person will know how to fix this airplane once it actually reaches them, was the idea in the Air Force. But same applies to graphic design, which is just make sure that what you're doing is so accessible and so obvious that when they're looking at it, they're not wondering which part of the graphic design they should be reading or which part they should be looking at. The flow should be really obvious, and the text that they're supposed to be paying attention to should be obvious, and the action that they're supposed to take at the end of reading this stuff or scanning it should be really obvious. If it's not, then you already failed. Like, number one rule of graphic design is just make everything really simple and obvious. There we go. Yeah, another good rule of thumb, just like with copywriting, is just that a design is only finished when there's nothing left to take away from it, not when there's nothing left to add on to it. And I think the more elements you are actually able to strip down from the design, it does really contribute to that simplicity. And you see a lot of examples of people doing this really poorly too. A lot of drink companies like Coca-Cola did an interesting transition over the years from really simple design into now they have cans with crazy bubbles flying up the sides of them and all of these swirls of color. And then at some point, I think a couple years ago, they went back to just the basic design of the stripes on the can and back to that kind of simple design as well, which is really interesting. Also, unless you're a great graphic designer, keeping it simple will once again make sure that you don't have that rope to hang yourself by. It just makes sure that you actually do have a design that makes sense to people, and the more that you do try to take away elements, just in general, I think the less messed up you can make things because there's less there. Paralysis of choice is another good reason to keep things simple. If you guys aren't familiar with that, it's the idea of I'm sure I've gone to so many crazy restaurants that just have 200 things on the menu. Including burgers and tacos and pasta. It's really, do you do all of these things well? And you kind of hit this, you're looking through and you're trying to find the best thing or the thing that you want right now. And when we're presented with too many options, which for human beings tends to be more than 3 to 5 a lot of times, we just hit this weird block where we can't make the choice, which for Blurble should be really it's pretty much the mechanism that you're acting on. For the game,
right?
Which is the basis of Blurble is that you throw down a card and you're supposed to say a word. There's a picture on the card and you're supposed to say a word that starts with the same letter as whatever's pictured on the card, which is really easy because there's a million words that start with the same letter as all of those. Only it's really hard. You just see the image and you're supposed to say it faster than everyone else around you, and it becomes really difficult. And it's that paralysis of choice taking effect in this case in a really amusing game-like way. Using a grid is a really good way to start too. If you're not sure how to lay things out or if your layout is looking sloppy, just throwing evenly spaced lines across the entire thing and making sure that your elements fit within that just does wonders for making any design look incredibly professional. It's a really simple thing that you can do. So that's all I'm going to say on simplicity so far. Making it usable. Is it readable? Is it clear? Do people know how to contact you? Are you getting the important information out there so that it makes sense? And in general, I think that usability, especially for business, is the main focus of the design. If you're throwing in design elements and you're you don't really know why you're throwing them in or they don't serve a distinct purpose that you're trying to get accomplished, it's probably a good sign that they're not supposed to be there. At its core, and this is different from fine art design or for something like that, where elements still do serve a purpose, but that purpose is kind of an overall aesthetic appeal. Aesthetic appeal is very secondary to whatever it is that you're trying to get them to buy or do, or with business, you want people to take a very specific action, not just say oh yes, it looks so nice, And if they walk away from your website saying, like, that was a really beautifully made site, like, I really respect that company, and they do nothing, that's terrible. That's as bad as them not really going to the website at all. Let's see, 30 seconds? Well, yeah, so if they're like, will they understand what they're supposed to do if they just glance at it for like 1 second? And then after that, if they stop and take the time to kind of read a little bit more, like will they understand a little bit more / have another action if they take 10 seconds? And same with 30 seconds, making sure that you kind of have these different tiers of ability that people have to actually stop and read through things. Because some people will want to. They'll just want to scroll through pages and pages of information and learn everything that they can about it. And some people will just take 1 second and scroll it over and decide whether they're going to go on from there. And being able to accommodate both of those types is really important as well. Getting into some just practical ways that we access information. When we're scanning pages and websites and things, you can take the fact that we read from left to right for this, but we scan in an F pattern. So it kind of starts at the top left of the page and then goes over to the top right, and then we go down, and it's kind of like bottom left to midway bottom right, and then down from there, almost like a reverse triangle. Did I do that right, drawing it backwards?
I'm trying to visualize it.
Yeah.
Conceptually,
There we go.
It makes a lot of sense.
Chika,
Oh,
da.
thank you. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. I was like, wait, I put a line on the wrong side there. Okay. So that's, and then a good thing to do with that too is to put the important information along the top like that, like in the top left for you guys. And then to put the call to action down towards the like mid to bottom right. And that's because that's how they'll scan for it. So they'll start up here and kind of work across and then go down here, and you want the thing that they end on in their scanning to be whatever it is that they're supposed to take action on. Just as a layout thought. We also read better in narrow columns. So if you just have like a block of really wide text going across the entire screen, we find that really hard to process and to comprehend, and it's way better to throw things into narrow columns that go down. It makes it just much easier for our silly human brains to comprehend what's going on. Consistency. Don't reinvent the wheel when you don't have a reason to. So if you're designing an interface where there needs to be navigation, don't be creative and throw the navigation on the right-hand side of the screen for a website. Throw it on the left or on the top like everyone else does. And that's because that's what we're trained to do. Like the design that we interact with on a regular basis is how we're trained to interact with the design that you guys are making as well. So unless you have a really good reason to break those patterns, breaking them just to stand apart or to say like, oh, my design will be like creative and do something so different than Facebook and do something so different than all these other people are doing, that's silly. You should probably just copy a lot of the things that other people are doing and then save the things that are going to be more time consuming and save the statements that you want to make with being creative for the stuff that you think actually matters or that will draw their attention. It's kind of like the old like film saying that you need to know the rules before you break them as well. Hold people's hands through the process of design in the sense of they're looking at your design and they shouldn't be wondering about where to go either. Like, okay, now you have the navigation on the left-hand side and you have some blocks of text and you have a call to action. But if you make the navigation and the call to action the same color, if you make it kind of unclear what they're supposed to be focusing on or paying attention to, then they'll get lost too. And when you get lost, you're like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing here. And you may just leave the site. You may just dismiss the poster and be like, oh, I think they were trying to say something about skydiving, but I don't really know what, and just walk on. So yeah, being consistent across holding their hand across the board is really good. Laying out a roadmap, we talked about this too in the copywriting portion, but actually spelling out just in the graphic design, here's what you're doing. Like, oh yeah, you should start here, then go to this page if you want to learn about this, and then if you're just ready to buy, you should just go right here. And laying out very clearly people's actions combined with their states of mind ends up doing wonders. Consistency. Same with the reinventing the wheel. If you want people to understand your brochure or your website or whatever it is that you're doing, don't switch up font sizes and colors and things for headers or different sections that mean the same thing. If you have scattered tips throughout a brochure, throughout a page of information, or throughout whatever billboard that you're doing, make sure that all of those little bits that are related have the same styling and the same colors that go along with them. The cake worksheet is a great example of this. I basically just take a similar worksheet each week that is sort of my template, and then break it apart and apply the exact same rules. So if you go back through every single cake worksheet, all the fonts are the same sizes, all of the boxes are the same colors, everything is set up pretty much exactly the same. And this does two things, which is it trains your audience how you're presenting information so that they can access it faster. And when they're scanning, they can actually get a lot more out of it because it is consistent and not confusing. And it also saves you a lot of time. If you actually have a little cheat sheet of design specifications that you use, like here's the font that I use for headers, here's the font that I use for this, here's the sizes for so-and-so, here's when I want to like really highlight something, I put it in this color box. You end up not spending nearly as much time agonizing over the details and really like, because otherwise it's an easy trap to fall into, to like scoot things over pixel by pixel until they look exactly right. And anyone who has actually done graphic design, I'm sure, knows this, which is, yeah, you get really obsessed with, delving really far in and saying, like, oh, like, this arrow doesn't quite go over as far as that arrow, and we want to push them back this way. And it's just a slippery slope if you do that. And I find having the specifications just stops you from worrying about it. Like, it stops your brain from kind of going down that crazy path. And then also, being consistent lets you break that consistency to call attention to different elements as well, which is really nice. And you have to be a little careful with that. Like, if you just completely break the look of your website, of course it's not going to, like, appear good. It's going to look like you slapped something on top of what was otherwise a good design. So you can totally mess up with that one. So be careful with the breaking the patterns. A good rule of thumb for that is to stray away from patterns only in one respect. So if you're going to throw up a highlight box, don't change the the font and the color and the fact that it's highlighted in a dark color and the background color. Just choose one to change and do that. Make it a little bigger and change the background color, or let's see. And then sorry, I had to put these out of order. Actionable. So that's kind of all the usability stuff that I wanted to cover immediately. Just some good rules of thumb to know. Also, the rule of thirds, if you guys know that one, is another good one to have just kind of in your little pocket toolkit. Really basic one. Usually I hear it in photography. Human beings just really like things broken into thirds, both vertically and horizontally. It's a really good way to divide things up. The golden ratio is another one. Which for you guys that don't know it, it's roughly 1.6 to 1 is what the golden ratio is, and it's a shape, actually the sheet that I printed out this week is roughly in the golden ratio size, just to demonstrate, and it's a shape where you can cut out a square, and then the area that's left becomes the same size as the original shape, so then that can be broken into a square and a similar size shape, etc., into infinity. And it's everywhere in nature, and human beings are just attracted to it, probably because it's everywhere in nature. But it's one of the most visually appealing patterns that we can throw up. So, actionable, and this is probably the most important part of this, because in the end what you want people to do is actually take action on something. The first thing is a really obvious call to action. Like on here, like the biggest, boldest, only thing with black text on there, make an obvious call to action, is the call to action on the actual sheet. Yeah, also referred to on websites sometimes as the big fucking button. You always want one thing there that's just like, do this, like click here, call this number. Once again, never make your audience wonder about those types of things. And also it requires a little refinement on your part too, because you need to figure out what that main call of action that you want people to take is. And throwing up, you're like, oh, well, I wanted to do this or this or this or this. And if you just throw all of those calls to action on the page, and they're all equally as bold, but maybe slightly different or even just the same, people aren't going to know where to click, and once again, there's that paralysis of choice. So in general, just make sure that with a single website page or a page of a brochure, like the inserts or whatever it is, or of a flyer or of a billboard, have one really clear call to action. And you can still have backup calls to action on there as well, but it doesn't mean that you can put them just as highlighted. Throw them into the background somewhere where they don't detract from the main thing that you're trying to get across. Another one I find really helps, and this is from the 37 Signals guys who I've talked about before. They do Basecamp and a bunch of other nice functional software. They say that one of the things that's helped them the most is just designing the key components the most. In the case of print design, this means, design your call to action first. So start with what is going to be taken, what is going to be used, or what people are going to be taking action on, and from there move out to the overall layout. Don't start with the idea that I think I'm going to have a big beach background, and maybe throw some text over here, and then something over on this side, and then maybe a little picture of my head popping out being I'm trustworthy over in the top left corner. Instead, start with that call to action, what you want to get done with that, and figure out how you want that to look and where you want that to go. And then build out slowly from there. And then like, okay, well, I want some supporting text here. And then like, and it's kind of the way that I write essays too, is I'll always go back and write the introduction paragraph first, after I already know kind of what I want to get across and the rest of it. Similar thing, just start with the important things. And that also just helps keep it simple too, because if your call to action is really short and your supporting text is really short and you start with those, adding on huge other big portions of things seems way less important once you see how clean that already looks on the design. No dead ends. That's along the lines of the call to action and having multiple calls of action. Is if you have text there, or if you have an image, make sure it's not just a dead end. If you have a little paragraph of text explaining something, have a little link that they can follow, like on a website, to get to more of it. Or if you have a little, like, a bit of text describing skydiving experience, have something that says, like, for more information, go here, like, gosh, I don't know, doesn't that sound fun? Even, like, requires them to think about it. Just making sure that it's not information without a purpose being presented to people. And that's not because information is bad, simply because you're wasting a chance otherwise. They reached the end of that information, and they should know what to do with it. Degradable actions ties into that too. So I find that one of the best things in general with pricing strategy, with graphic design for selling things that you're going to throw up to the public, with anything like that, is making sure that if you miss them on the big thing, you can still pick them up on smaller ones. So we just went to this convention, this expo, this weekend for Float On, and the main thing that we really wanted to start doing, especially going to an expo, was selling float tanks, which we've just started doing, which are pretty pricey items. Like the cheapest float tanks are somewhere around 12 grand if you want to get them for commercial use. So if we went there only with the hoping to sell float tanks, we probably would be disappointed. We didn't end up selling a single float tank while we were there. Just the expo, I think, was not the right place for us, as it turns out, for that one. But fortunately, we had a lot of degrading actions from there. So it went down from buy a float tank to like, hey, we happen to have 4 down in Southeast Portland. Why don't you just come float with us and try that out and get a certificate or book yourself in? And then if they didn't do that, we get to go down and say like, well, hey, we also made this art book. You can buy that. And we took out prints from the art book and took our 10 favorite pieces and made art prints out of them. So like, oh, even the art book is too much for you? Like, well, how about a $5 art print? And like, oh, you decide not to buy anything at all? Like, why don't you just throw your name onto our mailing list? And those kinds of degrading actions you can throw into graphic design in general too. Even if you have that giant call to action, come skydive with us, and they're not going to take that, you can at least throw your website along the bottom, right? You rarely see any kind of big billboard or big banner or anything without the company's website on there, and that's because that's like the secondary action that they'd love you to take. Like, okay, you're not going to call us right this second and book an appointment for a massage? Well, you can at least find a little more about us if you go here, is the idea behind it. And making an intelligent scale of actions that you'd like them to take is really a good idea. Let's see. So some general best practices that I find. We already talked a little bit about layout, the F pattern, the golden ratio. Also, making sure that your information and that call to action that you want them to take is on every single page of your design. If you're going for multiple things, like even with the brochure where they open it up and they have this kind of little 2-flap design, then you open it up from there and you have your kind of middle design, you flip it over, you have the back. Making sure that you have the information that you want them to access on all areas of that is really important. Same with the web page, especially. Just because there's so many ways that people can get access to your site, whether it's some crazy link that someone found on some random site, whether it's a Google search that just happened to land on like the 5th deep page of your website that's just talking about your team, whatever it is. Our world's just more and more explodable, and attention is more and more scarce, which means that you want to make sure that you have their attention, wherever that attention happens to be, they still have that call to action. Like, don't count on them to, once they're in the middle of your brochure, then flip over to the back to find out, like, it's only on the final page that they know what they're supposed to do. Otherwise, they might, get the cover of the inside and then just call it quits and toss it down. And once again, that would just be an unfortunate loss. Logos, we'll talk a little bit about logo design. If you look it up, you can find a lot of basics for logo design out there on a lot of different websites. I think there's like 5 kind of key elements that a lot of people put out there for logo design in general. I'm going to keep them down to about 3, which I think are the most important, which is make sure it's simple, Simple enough that if you shrink it down to almost nothing, like on here, you can still tell that it's the logo. Nike logo is typically held up as an example of just the best logo out there in almost everything that I've read, just because that swoosh is so identifiable and like kind of has the motion that signifies like what they're trying to get across, and just it can fit down to any size and still be so identifiable. Making sure that it looks good in monochrome colors, also important because of photocopying, because of all kinds of reasons. Also, just if you have different colors of design, or if you want to be able to toss your design like you're partnering up with someone else, and you want to make sure that your design can match theirs, being able to design in monochrome means you can just make that monochrome color, whatever color is going to go well with the design of whatever company that you're working with. Yeah, make sure it's so simple, black and white, can be seen from far away. Those are the basic ones. Images. Match your color scheme with your images. If you're designing something around an image, like if you're not talking about the actual logo or web page or something that's more ubiquitous across your entire company like that, you can just pull colors straight out of the image, which is the best way to make sure that colors match your image. And a really nice way to do that too. If you are at all good at Photoshop, there's even online resources where you can toss images up and have them like severely pixelated. But just taking a pixel version of the image, which basically just takes an average blend of all the colors around it, so you end up with maybe like 9 squares from the image, is really great for just being able to nab colors from that. And whichever color you take from the image, and like if you threw that behind it, it would just look fine, going and would mix perfectly with all the other colors in the image just because it was actually taken straight from there. Zooming way in tends to look better than having a way zoomed out image, is another one. And you'll notice this too, this is a general photography thing as well. Like if you're taking a shot of almost anything that you like, taking it from really far away is just going to look a lot more flat and a lot more static than if you get up close and try to get this really kind of like action shot or use steep angles. So for graphic design, actually taking a larger image and just breaking it apart into smaller images, or taking little small sections of it and taking that out and using that from a much bigger canvas. If you use a lot of those smaller images from a larger picture, it makes sure that those colors, once again, will go perfectly together because they're taken from the same image and kind of has the same development and everything else in combination, and also make sure that, yeah, it'll be a lot more accessible and a lot more interesting to people who are looking at it. Fonts, I think, is the next one. Yeah, text and fonts. This is a really nice trick, and I think a lot of people have trouble figuring out how to, like, hey, how do you even decide on a good font for something? Like, it seems so baffling almost, and I think most people just kind of look at fonts and say, like, well, I like that one, or like, okay, I'm designing an old Western product, like, I'll go for this old Western font. And that's about the thought that they throw into it, or like, oh, it's supposed to be kind of sleek, like this one looks like a nice businessy font, I'll go with that, it has nice round edges, and it's sans serif. The easiest way that I know to choose out a good font is actually just to flip a block of text upside down from that font and look at the shapes that the letters make sure that those shapes are in line with whatever it is that you're designing and whatever photos that you have around that. So you actually are looking for the shapes of the letters, and unfortunately our brain is really bad at comprehending those shapes when we're looking at a block of text because we just immediately want to read it. And flipping it upside down and using nonsense words too, or translating it into a foreign language and flipping it upside down actually lets us get a sense of the aesthetics of the text, which is really nice. In general, serif for print, and if you don't know, a serif font is just one that has the little like doohickeys on the end of them, so like an F that has the little line at the bottom of it, or you can even look at this sheet. So the serif font is the one, like all of the headers. The keep it simple, for example, is in a serif, and then all of the smaller text is a sans serif, which means they don't have those little decorations going across the ends of the letters. I was reading a usability post recently too that said they were doing studies on serif versus sans serif for internet reading and for in-print reading, and they pretty much couldn't find a difference between the two functionally.
That's great.
Yeah, right. So as far as functionality goes, it doesn't seem to make too much of a difference. But once again, don't reinvent the wheel unless you have a good reason to. People expect to see serif fonts in print and sans serif online, and that's in general a good thing to stick to unless you have a reason to break away from that. Oh man, this is great. Okay, colors. We'll go into color theory. Colors, so I'm not going to go into the color wheel too much, or how to make complementary colors, or how to choose your color scheme. There's a lot of ways to do that, and if you just look up picking good color schemes online or color themes, you'll not only find huge lists of colors that work really well together, you'll also find out the actual theory behind it and how to choose them and what to do with that. You can even do things once you know the color wheel and color theory, like pick one color from an image that you have, and then just immediately know what colors will go well with that and look good with the image and anything like that. So since you can do background research on that, and it's kind of hard to demonstrate without colors right in front of me and a nice color wheel, what I want to talk about is just the actual psychological effect of colors on our brain, what we think about when we're using them, and what they do to us from a biological perspective, and that's the psychologist in me coming out again. So let's start with yellow. Yellow, like happy, energy. Also, like if you're around enough yellow, then your brain actually starts secreting more serotonin, which is kind of great. So it actually does make you happier. Yellow and red also signify hunger and will actually make us hungry, which is why a lot of fast food places use them, pizza delivery places. You have McDonald's, In-N-Out, Freddy's even has a giant red sign. Vaughn's, almost any grocery store you see will have a giant red sign. That's because biologically it makes us hungrier. It also draws attention better than anything else. It's the color of blood. It's the color of a lot of the light you're getting through the womb. And whatever the reason is, like there's a kind of like background explanations for why maybe it draws attention. But whatever the reason, red does just draw our attention like crazy. So those call to actions are great to put into red, as long as you don't mind being a little like gaudy and tossing big red text across your page. It will definitely bring their eye over there. Purple, color of royalty. Also, along with burgundies, it encourages lingering for some reason. So you'll see a lot of restaurants decked out in kind of dim or even, kind of like light purple or burgundy lighting. Same with tablecloths, tend to be almost a burgundy color, and that's not just so it'll hide wine stains. Blue is calm focus, knowledge, and expertise. A whole lot of the world is blue, so we're really familiar with that color. It makes us comfortable, like the sky, the ocean. Also, a bulk of online pages, because they do want to kind of accomplish that accessibility and that sense of professionalism, you'll see blue across a ton of graphic design. Blue is one of the most commonly used colors. Green, intelligent, fresh. Don't know of any actual biological responses we get from green unless you have like a seafoam green, which is really calming. It's also used in hospitals. Along with that, pink too is actually one of the most calming colors to human beings, which is interesting because red is such a perk us up, cause our systems to go crazy color. Pink, they actually paint jail cells of some of the most violent criminals pink to naturally calm down their system, which is interesting. Portland actually has its own set of design colors. I don't know if you've noticed this if you go to a lot of Portland local businesses, and their own design fonts as well. Actually, this slab font that I used is very similar to a Portland font that gets used a lot, only the edges are a little more rounded, but kind of that serif rounded font is really Portland standard. They tend to use sort of a olive green kind of color, called moss green, and like a burnt yellow, and like a rusty red, and then browns. And those, I think, are the four colors that make up. If you drive by New Seasons, you'll see at least 3 or 4 of those colors, or all 4 of them, on the New Seasons sign. If you go to Supportland website, they use all of those colors. Anything that I think is really trying to be Portland local for some reason, that just at some point became the Portland colors.
Nature.
Yeah. Yeah, very rainy and dirty. That's pretty much all I had to say for colors for now. So there's just a little briefing on some of the psychological effects of those colors and how they get used typically. Let's talk about pulling attention and how you do that. Now that you know you want a giant call to action there, and other than making it really big or red, how are you going to pull attention? Make it bold, make it red, make it big. Those are the basic ones. Highlight it, italicize it. Change the color of the text, change the color of the background, have arrows pointing at it, have people looking at it is a really good one. If you look at eye scans, when we're looking at images or photographs, where we pay attention to is wherever lines of sight are going. So you'll see like, a person looking off at this wall. And if you're actually like tracking where your guys' eyes are looking, if I'm looking over here, chances are a lot of you are focused either on my face or exactly where I'm looking because you're curious about that. So in design, make sure that you don't have like a picture of a person just looking off the side of your screen, because once again, that's just wasted space. And they'll just be like, whoa, what's off the side of the screen? Let's look at everything. Instead, have them looking towards where you want them to take action and towards the important thing. Let's see. Same with objects in motion. Those push attention as well. So if you have like a bicycle riding in a certain direction, that's naturally going to be the direction that people's eyes scan in. So making sure that the direction of motion of your images, even if the object itself isn't in motion, like for instance with this cake and fork, for instance, it's not in motion, but the fork is still kind of directing attention just with the line that it makes of this kind of swoosh off to one side. So it's either going to direct off to the left there or off to the right, and you're less likely to look right under the fork, for example, because there's not that continue line through going there. So hopefully it goes from tip of the fork over and kind of actually makes a connection to this obvious call to action with just that image. At the very least, it doesn't detract from it. There's not a giant up and down motion going in that image, so you're not like going parallel to the call to action instead of towards it. Surround something in white space, or take away other distracting elements is just as important. Instead of making something really huge and bold and making it stand out as compared to everything else, you can kind of push everything else off to the side and make it smaller and give whatever it is that you're trying to draw attention to room to breathe. And that also will call a lot of attention to it. A single sentence of 3 words or even 2 words, right? Like got milk on a giant blank canvas or a giant billboard is, I think, way more effective than even if they had an image of milk up there, or, sometimes they'll throw the milk mustache person up there, but it's very clear, like 2 words, photo of person, probably looking at those 2 words or looking at the website is what they're accomplishing with that graphic design. Way better than a billboard full of like all the benefits of milk and everything that it does for you. Every time I turn my phone sideways, it ruins my scrolling and I lose my place on this thing. Any combination of these things as well. Don't go crazy. Like, you don't need to make everything else really small and fade to the background, make this giant and bold and red and put like a bright yellow background on it and do all of those things and have an object and like a giant, ski mobile like crashing into it from down above or something. But combining things too also makes a difference, and depending on how much you want to call attention to it, like, this guy on here has a couple arrows pointing to it, has this sort of visual trail leading over to it, is the only thing highlighted in black, is bigger and bolder than everything else on there. It still doesn't look too messy, despite breaking the pattern of everything else in all of those ways. It still kind of fits in. So you can combine a lot of those and really actually make a much more significant punch with them. Let's see. And once again, just a reminder, which is that you want to be able to make sure that you're pulling attention towards one thing in general. And the other things are really secondary to that and provide background research. If they do want to learn more about it, if they do want to take a little bit more time before they take this obvious call to action, before they look at the thing that you've pulled attention to, then you have the other elements there that support it and that provide more information, and hopefully end up directing them right back up to it in the visual field. Testing is one of the things that I wanted to leave you with this. It's great to talk about all the best practices of design and how to do things and how to get people to look in certain places and click on certain things or like call a certain phone number. But every, not only person, but group of people is completely different. And what works really well for some websites or some brochures or some banners or billboards just won't work at all for another company. You can follow someone's best practices that made them $1 million company just from like some crazy direct mailer that they sent out, and it will make you absolutely nothing, not even get you a single sign up on your mailing list. So making sure to actually take these ideas and do different versions of them, just like we always emphasize with Cake. Testing is wonderful, and as long as we have the scientific method, we might as well use it. So whenever you're designing something, I really suggest also, if you have the time, even if you just want to tweak one small thing, have different versions of it and be able to see how people respond to that in different ways. And a typical way to do this with print is, of course, throwing on coupon codes. You can have the exact same design with 2 different codes and just change, one little thing on there, like what the headline says for copy, or in this case, how you highlight the call to action, how you make it pull their attention, and you change only that one thing, and then you see which code gets used more often. And then you have that design, and then you can A/B test that as well, and just kind of move down the testing ladder until slowly let your audience tell you what good graphic design is, and you're not just listening to me or what you read in a book somewhere, but it's based on what people are actually taking action on. And then a few things that I had that just kind of didn't fit into any of the categories that I was trying to break this down into, but that I still wanted to make sure to toss out there that I find are tactics that work really well. Thinking about engaging more than just sight and engaging the other senses, I think, is a really good one. Because when we talk about design, a lot of what we're talking about is print and is billboards and is things that are meant to be handed out to people, or is a website they're going to. But our culture is just significantly more multimedia based now than it was, and we have a lot more options with things that we're able to do. So, and if you're designing packaging, then that's a whole nother story. The sound that certain cans make when they actually flip the tab and open them up has been copyrighted. The pop that you make when you pop the top on Pringles is specially designed. The crunch that Doritos makes was manufactured to just be incredibly satisfying to us. Things like that are also design elements, and if you make them unique and if you make it consistent, then anytime that they have that sort of sense, then hopefully they'll associate it with you as well. For us, and this wasn't a planned one, but in Float On, the smell of Epsom salt and of having just that many pounds of Epsom salt in water sitting around is a very distinct smell. And hopefully anytime they're around anything that smells like Epsom salt, they start thinking of the float tanks again. I definitely do. Same with, and this is kind of a weird one because it doesn't actually tie in the music, but the actual name Float On ties very nicely into the Modest Mouse song Float On. So that I think whenever it comes on for me, I always think of my business, / I've had other customers tell me the exact same thing. They always get really happy when the Modest Mouse song Float On comes on. They just start singing along and start thinking about their floats, which is great. So that's sort of an association with another sense with music rather than this direct tie-in to the design, but still something to think about. Making along also the lines of consistency, you can do really creative things that aren't so overt. I think I might have mentioned this one with the Coca-Cola couch and American Idol before, but it's just genius and worked so well. They didn't, other than having the Coke can sitting in front of the judges or whatever for Coke sponsoring them, they didn't want a giant Coke banner across the stage or anything like that. And so they designed that swirly red couch that they put on the American Idol stage, which is actually supposed to look and be reminiscent of the Coke logo, which they ran some tests on that, and that even more than the product placement was driving up sales of Coke just from watching that and being in this very subliminal kind of way tied into the design. So figuring out ways that your design itself can support whatever it is that you're doing and whatever it is that you're trying to get across, like these little bite marks kind of thrown in on a lot of the cake design also suggests cake, even though it's not specifically a picture of cake. Whereas if you threw just random bite marks on a company that was called, business consulting conglomerate, and you'd be like, okay, I guess there are just these bites there, and it's there for style. And in this case, it really makes sense for tying in and reinforces the entire idea. Openness to suggestions and actually encouraging people to suggest how to change your design is another really big one. And you'll see that not only on graphic design, but also on product design, on a lot of different sources. You'll see hey, call this number if you have any suggestions for a better recipe for our brownies, or a really common one on a website is just at the bottom, do you have any ways that we can improve this page, or was anything broken? And it turns out just that alone is incredible at driving improvements. If you just started with not knowing anything about graphic design and just had a really solid personal call to action, I really suck at graphic design, please help me, is there anything unclear on this page, type it in here. I guarantee that if you just followed the advice that people went in and did no research at all, you'd end up with a pretty solid design by the end of a few months of actually just taking people's advice. And that's that idea too of your customers are the ones you should be listening to, they're the ones you want to take action. And the more also you encourage interactivity, the better. Considering your audience, it's pretty obvious, and I think that this one barely needs mentioning, but I thought I'd toss it out there anyway. Along the lines of you're not able to make design that is the best design. There is no best design. There's only designs that suit certain purposes better than others. So even in the health industry, for example, you're not going to have the same design on a mixed martial arts website that you're going to have on a yoga studio, right? That would be silly. Mixed martial arts is a lot of cages and really industrial and slam letters, and yoga is a lot of bamboo and curved edges and things like that. And it just has to do with the frame of mind. You know, one is like trying to get your adrenaline pumping, and one is trying to like mellow out your entire system. And making sure that your design, once again, actually does support what it is that you're trying to say and get across. And most of us already know that. That's actually, I think, where most of us start with design, is saying, oh, I kind of want it to look like this because this is the feeling that I want to get across. And all the others are the actual tactics to do that. So just a recap of a lot of the more important things here. Keeping it simple. At the very least, keep it simple. Like, if you can't decide and if your design's looking ugly, just start stripping it away. Go down to that 2 words on a blank piece of paper, the got milk strategy. You know, maybe throw one little image up in the corner. If that still makes it look bad, take out the image. Just go back to the 2 words. You know, 2 words on a blank page is almost never going to look bad, is the nice thing. And just the more things you add in, the more chances you have to mess yourself up. So the worse you are at design, really, the simpler that you should try to get it. Thinking about making it usable. Make sure that everyone who's going to your site is actually having a good experience and knows where to go, that the things are laid out in a way that makes sense for our brains, and then make it actionable. Make sure that once they've actually absorbed that knowledge, once you've gotten them to look where you want them to look, that they know exactly what they're supposed to do next. And that, once again, is the most important thing. And that fortunately, is the one that's the most testable as well, which is a good thing about the action, because you can tell if they've taken the action. So if you're throwing out a ton of designs and that's just not coming in, then back to the drawing board. And I would say back to the drawing board, once again, means the keep it simple and start stripping things away and see like how simple you can get it and have people actually take that action. And that's pretty much it. That's the primer that I have for you guys on design for business. Yeah. Nice. I actually came in a good time that time. Any questions about that or anything that you guys were curious about before we take a little break and come back for a workshop?
One thing I wanted to bring up that happens a lot in website development is you want to be able to print it out as well. And we've done things where you've taken a site and made sure that it looks good on a business card as well as an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper.
Nice.
And that when you're holding that card and you go to that website, you have this little magic gate that opens up between the two and they match. And just kind of keeping your design in mind. I think it's funny because a lot of sites could be just a digital business card and that would be enough.
Nice.
So it's something that, might be something to kind of elaborate on a little bit, is that simplicity, because you can only fit so much on a business card, and that's enough to get someone to call you up.
Yeah.
And get that thing, the ball rolling a little bit.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really good. I really like that one as a little mental framework to put things in. Like, yeah, if you had to fit your entire design for whatever it is you're doing on a business card, what would you do with it? Is a really nice framework to put it in.
Yeah, I think people, like you said, that choice paralysis thing, when designing a site, you think about all the millions of options there are out there, and then you take on this project that never gets done, it is sloppy, and it's, like 30% of the quality that it should be, whereas pretty much in a day you can design a business card, and even if you have no experience, put up just a big image on the website of the card itself, and it's got the pertinent information, the title of the company, the contact info, what you do, and something that's more ethereal, that's a little bit less easy to define, which is some sort of a design. And that's enough for someone to at least get some sort of a personal connection with what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's really solid.
That's like 95% of a good site, I feel like. And the rest is like, if you've got it, flaunt it, but otherwise don't pretend like it's there. I feel like a lot of content is lacking, whereas they try to make up for it with design.
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
kind of funny.
No, that's really solid, actually. I really like that. And really good advice, too, on the throwing up an image, just the straight image as a website, if you don't know anything about website design. Also, I've completely done that before on small projects that I have. I'm like, I do not, and I know website design. I'm just like, I don't have time for this. And we'll just like mock something up in Photoshop and just like throw that giant image up there. And like, sure, it's like not best practice and it doesn't optimize for SEO or anything, but it works. And you'll have the site up way faster, and it's way better to have something up there than nothing, yeah.
So Burke has a question online. He's any color besides blue that would be conducive to invoking trust psychologically?
That's a good question. I mean, that's like one of the. Yeah, I mean, that, I think that's. So you might go with green is a good one too. A lot of natural colors like that. I mean, in Portland, probably the Portland colors are a good one to invoke trust. Familiarity in general is really good, which I think is why blue is the color that's chosen for that, just because blue is the most familiar color. Like it sort of like surrounds us so much of the time, other than maybe black or something like that.
I think black doesn't evoke trust. I think that's kind of a warning color.
Right, more like professional. I mean, text is black, and
I was just going to say that was kind of a trick question because any color that invokes trust, a lot of times just grayscales and really professional, clean, white, middle gray, and black. It's
Yeah.
pretty much like this is the point. We don't have anything else to hide.
totally.
Straight up. There's
Yeah.
a lot of good grayscale sites out there. They're still really good and solid and professional.
Definitely. Also, the probably like if you want a really strong design that's incredibly simple, just having a black and white site with one highlight color, whether it be blue or red, also just looks incredible with black and white. Like black, white, and red is kind of the basis of a ton of design. But more than that, I think if what you're going for, is trustworthiness. Just having a really simple layout and not having too many colors. Probably choosing like I said, one highlight color is a really good way to get that across. Nice.
I say we break and then we come back with a workshop and cakes provided by Blurble.
Yes! Thanks, Grant.
Contribute to his Kickstarter. You'll get a deck of cards if he makes it. So.
Nice. What's the time?
When he makes it.
I got a month.
Oh, really?
Month today.
31
So
days,
far.
right?
I passed the halfway point yesterday, so
Halfway in funds?
yeah.
Oh,
So,
That's awesome.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds-
Have you had it up?
I did the 60 days. So,
Alright, I'm gonna take a break.
Today is.
Alright, and we'll see you guys back in 10 minutes.
Awesome.